So it is important that we understand the tainted history of land acquisition in Jamaica. We have to go back to 1655 when the English defeated the Spaniards. The Spaniards had settled in Jamaica after 1494 when Christopher Columbus claimed that he had discovered Jamaica. And when this English came to Jamaica, there were a few Spanish settlers. Their capital was Santiago de la Vega. That was modern day Spanish town at the time. Now, there were a few Tainos. Tainos were the indigenous people who lived in Jamaica at the time. And the Spaniards had some enslaved Africans who worked their plantations and who provided labor for them. Now, after Penn and Venables, the two generals, English generals who defeated the Spaniards, successfully captured Jamaica, they seized all Spanish possessions, Spanish lands and properties. And having seized this land and properties, they encouraged English settlers. So you had a man by the name of Major General Luke Stokes, who was the governor in Nevis. He led an expedition of 1,600 persons, settlers from Nevis to Jamaica. Now, in order to give an incentive to these people to remain on the island, the British Crown granted these settlers land. They issued land patents, which were like titles, which were recorded at the island's records office. And they made land grants. Now, over time, the issuing of land grants, these were done to wealthy English families, merchants, and planters. And the British shifted focus and began to cultivate sugarcane. They realized that sugarcane required huge tracts of land, fertile land. And so this type of land could be found in St. Catherine, Clarendon, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, and Westmoreland. So the granting of land to settlers created a plantocracy over time. And as a result of these lands, the transatlantic slave trade developed because enslaved Africans were brought from Africa to the Caribbean to work on these sugar plantations. And grantees of these lands over time became absentee land owners. And these landowners benefited and profited from having plantations in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, even though they lived in England. Now, the Church of England was also granted huge tracts of land by the English crown. As a matter of fact, in 1667, the St. Andrew Parish Church was granted 600 acres of land by King Charles II. And this was a form of incentive because the church the Church of England was the established church, and it helped to perpetuate slavery, right? And to ensure that the status quo was kept by their religious teaching and so on. Now, a powerful planter class or plantocracy developed, and they dominated in politics, economics, and in the church, right? Now, these land grants which were given were tied to loyalty to the crown and to military service. So you find that the persons who were given these huge tracts of land by the English crown, they were loyal to the crown, they perpetuated the system, and they ensured that the status quo was kept. And some of these people were also military people who had given military service. So they were rewarded with land grants. You have names such as the Beestons and the Beckfords in St. Elizabeth, right? Now, you would have thought that these enslaved Africans post-emancipation, that is after slavery was abolished in 1838, they would have been compensated for 300 years of free labor and generations after generations being born into slavery. No, you know who were compensated? The planter class. The planter class actually were paid 20 million pounds by the British Crown, right? And the formerly enslaved people were never compensated. They were never apologized to for slavery, and they were not given any land, right? So we see that this contributed to inequalities in land acquisition in the island, because the formerly enslaved people had to depend on some of the independent churches, such as the Moravian Church, the Baptist Church, and the Methodist Church, to form what we call free villages. And a free village is a settlement of formerly enslaved people established away from the plantation to give them some kind of autonomy, independence, and dignity after slavery. I will do a video concerning the establishment of free villages in Jamaica. But there you have it, the tainted history of land acquisition in Jamaica. And it tells you that the lands which are now considered a part of Jamaica, the history of it, the English acquired it through conquest and gave huge tracts of land to English settlers as incentives to settle the island and as reward to their military officers and soldiers. I hope we have learned something. God bless you until we meet again. Amen.